I just want to say that you know your truth, and you have to stand by that. You have to live a life that is true to who you are, and not listen to what other people say about you, what other people determine about you or believe about you or tell you who you are is only true if you believe them too. So, since this is about writing books, I say we are the only ones who can write our story. And if you don't like your story, write a new story. Tear that page out of the book, crumple it up, and start writing a story that makes you happy and makes you smile and brings joy to your heart.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter. I have a friend of a friend, and together, the three of us are friends, which is amazing. And my good friend Victoria introduced me to an amazing person. And Dana's here to talk about her journey as an author. 2 books done, 1 more coming. And her story is impactful, powerful. And for you that are listening, as you see the title of the episode, you're here for a reason, and you're going to meet somebody who's got a story that's going to help you. So, Dana, thank you so much for making time to be here with us on Living the Next Chapter. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here because I always want to help other people who are authors or trying to become authors or even just have a story to tell. And we all have stories, don't we?
That's right. We do. And the best stories are the ones that are told, shared with the world, because they're going to help people. And that's a part of your story. The idea of writing your story, when did the idea come to you that this needed to be out there in the world to help people? What was the spark to write the books?
It's actually, that in itself is a long story. I'll give you the short version. I came out of an abusive childhood, and as somebody that was not helped by child services and the police and, everybody looked the other way back then, I just had a strong inclination that at some point in my life, when I grew up, I was going to help other kids that were abused so that they don't have to feel the pain that I was feeling and that suffering. So when I went to college, I actually did not want to go to college. I wanted to go to beauty school. But I was raised by 2 narcissists, and they couldn't have a daughter that was in beauty school because they couldn't brag about that when their, other nieces and nephews were going to become engineers and going to school for, medical school or becoming therapists of some sort. So I had to go to college. So I went to DePaul University in Chicago, born and raised a Catholic. So good girl, went to Catholic school. And I had no idea what I was going to do. But initially in my first year as a freshman, my first quarter there, I had so many teachers approach me that, about my public speaking abilities. I was a little shy because I wasn't confident and I was very insecure having come out of that abusive childhood. But if I knew what I was talking about, I was that girl in public speaking that was like, who wants to go first? And everybody would look around and be like shaken. And I'd be like, okay, I'll go. Like, let me just get it over with because I have anxiety too. But they also, a lot of my professors and other students, some of the people in my classes recognized that I was a very talented writer naturally. I had never been told that I was really that good at anything, so I kind of surprised myself. So I went into the journalism program thinking I was going to be a broadcast journalist. I'll be a newscaster or something, probably in some podunk town somewhere where nobody watched that cable station. But, it's hard to make it in the big cities. I wouldn't be on NBC anytime soon. But I did love Barbara Walters. I mean, back in the day, back in the 80s, growing up and watching her, and in the 90s, I mean, she was just so respectful, but so good at what she did. And so I kind of strived for that. But fast forward, unfortunately, here's where my first book, what it's about is that first marriage of mine. I fell into the lair of another narcissist, and, 25 years with him towards the end of that marriage, I actually became very ill. After about a year and a half of medical testing, Mayo Clinic actually realized that I had so much cortisol, which is a stress hormone, running through my body because I was living in fight or flight mode. for decades, literally since childhood, that it had made me autoimmune. And the scratchiness you hear in my voice, I developed a rare lung syndrome that's like having COPD and fibromyalgia. And it's because of living with emotional and stress for so long. My stress hormone levels were 4 times the norm, 4 times higher than what they should be at their highest for so long that my body just turned against itself. So that was a wake-up call to me where I said, okay, I think I realized I kind of woke up, so to speak, and I thought, this is really important. And then everything's, for people to understand that stress can really kill you, because at that point, my body was also shutting down. I dropped 20 pounds and I'm not that big to begin with. I'm barely over 100 pounds. So you can imagine what I looked like 20 pounds lighter than that. I mean, it was even scaring me. My organs were not functioning properly. It was a very scary time, but it was a wake-up call to, 1, get out of that marriage, and 2, I thought, this is my life coming full circle. This is an opportunity to do what I've always wanted to do, which was help other victims of abuse. And I realized, that education that I'd gotten in journalism that I'd never done anything with because I was married to a narcissist who could, not possibly conceive of me doing anything that brought me joy or success. This was my opportunity. It's like everything had been laid out for me to do exactly what I'm doing now, which is writing books about my experiences to help other people to prevent them from the physical ailments I am now suffering as a souvenir of the past, and to just, if nothing else, make them feel less alone, so they know it's not just them and they're not crazy. So that's how my first book came to be. I got divorced, and I'm like, I had a journal. Sadly, there was domestic violence involved even after the divorce. So I had been keeping a journal just in case something happened to me, which is really sad, but dates and a little blurb about what was going on. And then during COVID, this was all happening during COVID. So during the shelter in place, I'm like, well, nobody's working and I have time. So let me elaborate on these stories since I can. And the elaboration of those stories ended up being this published first book of mine, which was a #1 new release and a best-selling book, which is both a sad and glad thing for me, because I'm glad, obviously, when you work for years on something, you want to see it do well. But I thought, wow, it's doing well because so many people are having the same experience or have had it or know somebody who's having this experience. So, but I'm still glad that it has brought me to this point where I have now written the second book, which was about my childhood, for those of us who have fallen into bad adult relationships as a result of, feeling like we didn't deserve better because of what we experienced in our childhood. And I've been so grateful to all the people that have supported me, like Victoria, who brought us together, because now I've been on, how many podcasts, because again, this is so relevant to so many aspects of life. These things that happen in our life, it affects our work, it affects our, our mental health, our physical health, our parenting abilities, there's just so many layers to it. So that gives an idea of how this all came. Like I said, it's a long story, but a beautiful one, how it all just kind of feels like it was all meant to be. It just sucks that I had to suffer to get to this point. But I look at it as a blessing now, because it's made me who I am, and it's made me able to help those who have been where I've been. And that's what I always wanted to do since I was 12 years old. So, it's amazing.
So, Dana, we have people listening to the podcast, and I want them to understand more clearly maybe their own situation through your eyes. Give us your definition of narcissism so that we can all be on the same journey here together in the conversation. I know there's different degrees, there's different elements involved, there's different context to it. But from your perspective, how would you define it for the listener?
Yeah, it's not a clear-cut definition, but this is my simplified version. There's 2 aspects. the first thing that I will say is that not all narcissists are bad. There is a spectrum. So I describe it like tumors. You can have a benign tumor, which is these are the people, like I always say, are on social media with the abs and the lashes and all the stuff. And they usually look as good as they think they do. So you can hate them if you want. They might be annoying, but they have a very, very healthy self-esteem. I actually wish I had a little more of that. But those are your benign tumors. They're not bothering anybody. Yeah. They're just there, right? Not a problem. But on the other end of the spectrum, you might have a malignant tumor. And what do those do? They bother you. They might even kill you. And I'm not saying that lightly, but these are the people that we see when we're watching true crime shows like 48 Hours in 2020. These are your serial killers, rapists, murderers, domestic violence. Some of us have married them and are still here to tell the story. But these are people that have to fulfill their egotistical need for power. And they do that through control, whether it's controlling finance, overpowering you physically. There's various aspects. And that's the second part of this so-called definition is narcissistic abuse. People think it's a specific type of abuse. It is just when a narcissist abuses you. But the problem with narcissistic abuse is that it's not just physical abuse or verbal abuse. It is a multitude. There's financial abuse, legal abuse. I mean, the manipulation, the gaslighting. I mean, I have heard so many stories of how far these people will go so that they feel better about themselves. They want to feel superior. They want to feel in control. And the sad part is it's usually because deep down, they are very insecure and they don't feel very good about themselves. So it gives them that lift that they need, that boost to their ego to demean and insult. And unfortunately, in some cases, they take people's lives or suck your soul out of you, for lack of better words. But it's a very complex thing that some people think is a disorder. I personally, and Victoria agrees with me on this, based on our experiences, I don't think it's a disorder. I think it's who you are. It's your personality. And unless you come to self-awareness and want to be different, there's no hope for changing that. But a narcissist, usually their ego can't withstand the thought that something would be deficient in them or have a weakness. So they usually aren't going to admit that they're narcissistic.
So when you hear two people talking about their relationship and the struggles they're having, do you have like a little radar now that goes off where you can kind of sense maybe somebody's in a situation to some degree similar to where you're at and what you've lived through? Like, do you get some kind of feeling like,
yeah,
wait a minute, I think we need to have a conversation? Like, do you pick up on that from other people now?
You know what? It's not just people that are victims of abuse. I'm very keen on physical, nonverbal communication, like gestures, eye movements, but also for me, I have a nickname, the word girl. I notice verbiage. And I think the words people use tell me more about what they're thinking and their perspective and their view on things than they might even realize. And it naturally flows out of their mouth, even if they don't have the exact right word to express what it is. But I find it in all aspects. And interestingly, even people, we all, Victoria and I lately, we also, even though we're helping people get all these hateful people on social media, these trolls, and everybody wants to go at them and say, oh, to heck with you. And,
a little bit more spicy, yeah.
But, that's our inclination. But you know what I see when somebody comes at me like that, and I have had some vile, nasty things said to me, is what I hear is you're hurting and you haven't dealt with that pain. Something happened to you and you haven't dealt with that. So you're projecting it. You're putting your pain on somebody else so you don't have to deal with it. So it's interesting how we're all different that way. But certainly I think every one of us has we call it anxiety and people think it's a bad thing. I argue that it's actually a phenomenal thing. It's like having a smoke alarm built into your body that says, ooh, this doesn't feel right, or this person is giving me not so good energy, or wow, I have a feeling this person is going through something really terrible. So I think we all have that. We just don't listen to it because we try so hard to reason and, use our intellect to justify or excuse things. But I think if we listen more to what our bodies are telling us and our instinct, we might be more in tune with other people. And it's a difficult thing, though, when somebody is a victim of abuse, approaching them directly, telling them to leave or they deserve better. They're not just suddenly going to say, okay, you're right, let me just get my stuff and walk out. And sometimes it's not safe for them to. But I think just being there, sometimes all people need is just, to know that you're there. For me, I always use this as an example, but I remember being in church one Sunday morning. And I just had my head down in my hands while everybody, Catholics, they take forever taking communion. So I'm sitting there in my pew waiting patiently, but I just had my head down, kind of slumped shoulders. And I just had an elderly lady that sat in the pew behind me. She just came and put her hand on my shoulder. And I mean, I will never forget the love and just that one gesture to me said, I see you. I hear you. I feel your pain. I'm here. And that's all we need sometimes. We already know we deserve better. We already know there's better for us out there. We already know we don't want to be in that situation. We don't need the pressure of people telling us. We just need to know that we have support.
So let's jump back to the classic story, Cinderella, the glass slipper. Okay. Prince Charming,
yes,
in our life. He's got what we want. He's got the glass slipper. He's got that thing we're missing in life. Very attractive to us and the relationship, the idea of being with this person. Just everything seems right. But there's this underlying current that we've been talking about where this person may not be the right person. There might be something that's living there. Why are people attractive even though they may have this underlying current? What is it about them? Is it like a light switch where they can be sweet and kind and generous and happy, and then all of a sudden they can just become controlling and like a different person? Like, what is it?
Well, narcissists do have that quality about them because, I always joke that I think people assume that I went out and I saw Chucky running down the street with a butcher knife and disheveled hair and a striped sweater. And I said, hey, baby, you're my type. No. Not so much. I mean, let's look at Ted Bundy from years ago. Wasn't he supposedly charming and handsome? And how many women did he rape and kill? And then he went home to his girlfriend's daughter who absolutely adored him as a father figure. So they are very, they know what they need to do to basically lure people into their web. I always say it's like being, in that spider web where you're stuck, you're prey, but you are stuck in that. But I also try to advise people to not look so much for the warning signs or the so-called red flags in other people, because we tend to, I mean, if we go based on what I just said, how can you trust anybody ever if you can't trust what's in front of you? That's where I go back to, let's turn it around to ourselves, because I would say, what was attractive, like for me, when I had, my personal Chucky that came along and said, hey, girl, you're looking good. And, I said, oh, let's go out on a date. And then 25 years later, he planned to kill me and made attempts on my life after the divorce. I mean, it doesn't go from A to B, over some argument or some terrible thing that happened. But the thing is that we have to be aware of ourselves and what is attractive about us to people like that prey on our vulnerability and our, I don't ever want to say that somebody is deficient, but I was clearly insecure coming out of an abusive home. at the time that I met my ex, I clearly wanted love, and I will admit, call it desperate, whatever, it is what it is, but I just wanted somebody to love me and like me even and give me affection, and it didn't even probably matter who it was. And so that was like, it was like open season, with narcissists, to come in and say, oh, well, let me take you, come this way, come hither. And I would have followed probably anybody, because as long as you give them what they want, you get what you want. But the second you stand up for yourself or do something that doesn't serve them and their goals and their needs, well, then you have a big problem.
When I had a guest on recently, we were talking about this topic, and I'm trying to process this and from an outside perspective to get better understanding. And my suggestion to them in the moment was, so is narcissism kind of similar to maybe a nice serene marina where all the boats are tied up at the docks and it's peaceful and there's people walking along and people swimming at the beach, and all of a sudden this loud yacht rock party boat comes into the marina at full speed, causing huge waves. It's loud. There's signs that say no wake, meaning slow down. To coming into the marina, they just ignore that, and they just come in and they just do what they want. And the ripples and the waves they cause in the marina upsets everybody, upsets everything. Even outside of the marina, the beach down, way down, there's little kids playing in the water, and all of a sudden these rough waves come out of nowhere. Like, is that the impact that a narcissist can have on a relationship and a family? Just roll in there with no thought of their impact on their surroundings. They just bowl over. Is that similar?
I'm sure some of them do, but most of them, that's the irony of it. And this is the issue for people that have been in those situations, is that when we come out of them, nobody believes us. And you know why? Because the narcissist is charitable and generous, and they're great with kids, and they love babies, and they would never hurt a fly. And you know what I mean? So it's really hard because nobody has seen that side of them.
Right.
That we see. We at home, yes. What you just described is, and no joke, a perfect symbolism of what I would feel when I would see my ex's vehicle coming up the driveway every day, when he would come home from work. That's how it felt. Because even in my son's eyes, I could see the panic. Like, we would start looking around. Is everything where it's supposed to be? Do I look okay? You're just like, you start to cringe, like, okay, bracing yourself for the impact. You know what I mean? So that's how it felt coming home. But to the outside world, I mean, because I always said, oh, I wish that my priest would come live with me, or I wish my ex-husband's mother would have lived with us. I wish somebody that he would never act that way in front of would live in our house, to see, even for one day, to see how he is behind closed doors. Because outside, to the outside world, they're wonderful people. And they're out there telling the rest of the world, oh, I don't know what to do about her. She's crazy. She's not mentally stable. And, her perception of things is really skewed. So they're kind of laying the groundwork for knowing that at some point when you go out there, whether it's telling your friend the truth or your mother or whoever, or leaving them. I mean, it's funny that even when I filed for divorce, my ex was going around and telling everybody that he had to leave me because I was harassing and abusing him. So it's the narrative is always villainizing the victim, and it's a sad thing. But that's why I always argue. People always assume, I should say, presume that there is a weakness in the victim, and it's not true at all. You have to be a very strong person to withstand that kind of treatment every single day. And I did it for 25 years, and willingly and voluntarily, because I thought I was doing the right thing to keep the family together for our son. But Boy, if you in the ultimate insult to a narcissist in a romantic relationship is to exit the relationship, and they will make you pay for it somehow.
It feels like you're being gaslit by the narcissist family and their circle, because they're like, that's not how he is. That's not
Everybody.
how he shows. So you must be.
Correct.
And then you're sitting here going, well, maybe it is me. Maybe I'm the problem, right? And all of this. And you're getting all that support of people saying that about that other person, that it can't be him. It's got to be you. So now you're kind of like battling yourself at the same time, right?
Oh, let me tell you, in my first book, I actually delve into this. It's interesting you bring that up, because at one point in our marriage, he had me so convinced, and he had created this narrative about me being emotionally unstable. That even I was convinced that there was something mentally wrong with me, that I went to a psychiatrist and came home with 2 mood stabilizers and Xanax, for the quick calm downs. And years later, after getting out of it, I was on those pills they diagnosed me with bipolar disorder, because that's what he said that I had. So I answered all the questions. Well, my husband says I do this. My husband says yes. My husband would say that I'm displaying this behavior. So I was on these antidepressants and mood stabilizers, 3 pills for 14, 15, 16 years, something like that. At the end of it, when I came out of the marriage and I finally spoke the truth about the abuses that were happening, the psychiatrist said, oh my gosh, all this time, he said, you have CPTSD. You don't have bipolar disorder. So I'm laughing. I mean, I'm thankful that we realized it, but how many people are misdiagnosed because they're convinced? And like you said, they're convincing everyone else. He even had my own, my 2 narcissistic parents, my mother and stepfather, convinced, and they're still running around telling everybody that I'm mentally unstable, because now I've spoken the truth about their treatment of me. So I have to be crazy so they don't look like, who they are to the rest of the world. But the sad part of that is the grief. We can say that, I'm just and I'm right and I'm speaking my truth and I'm strong, and that's great and it's brave. But you know what the sad part is for somebody like me, and I know there are so many people who unfortunately experience this, is the abandonment that comes when you do speak your truth. Because I've been exiled from my ex-husband's family, who I was very close to, because I didn't have a relationship with my mother and stepfather. I've been exiled from that family. My stepfather's family, that was, 40 years. They were my, he was essentially the person who raised me. He was my dad. And so it's just really sad to, endure the grief, basically, of everybody I ever cared about and everybody I ever thought who did love me, and to see that I was so easily discarded because I spoke the truth. Yet I was the victim, and I'm the one who's abandoned and left alone. So it's a sad thing, but, I stand my ground, and I'm just grateful that there's plenty of other people who are out there that, provide support and who are now my family. Like we were joking before we came on that Victoria, who introduced us, she always says I'm like her twin sister, and we were separated at birth. And I love that, because, I could use a sister like Victoria, especially. She's amazing. So
the one thing that I love about podcasting, Dana, is that nobody knows what you're listening to right now. So you could be listening to Ariana Grande. You could be listening to this podcast, an audiobook, anything. And in that, there's safety and security for the person listening today, where the person across the room from them has no idea they're hearing this conversation right now. And your books are going to help them. Maybe this is the first time they've heard somebody talk like this before. And they've been in that circle of feeling like they're the problem. And that's all they hear. And that's all they're feeling right now. And they're really afraid. They're afraid that they're messing all this up. And hearing your words makes them go, hang on, wait a minute. Dana's telling me that it might not be me. Well, like all the experts say it's me, and my partner says it's me, and their circle says it's me. Dana's telling me it might not be me. So if I just kind of move out of the way for a moment and in the safety and security of this moment as a podcast, and again, nobody knows that I'm listening to this right now. What do you say to that person that's listening who is desperate for a resource like you and your books and your story? If I get out of the way, what do you want to say to them?
I just want to say that you know your truth. And you have to stand by that. You have to live a life that is true to who you are, and not listen to what other people say about you, what other people determine about you or believe about you or tell you who you are is only true if you believe them too. So, since this is about writing books, I say we are the only ones who can write our story. And if you don't like your story, write a new story. Tear that page out of the book, crumple it up, and start writing a story that makes you happy and makes you smile and brings joy to your heart.
Where should this person go to get help in a safe way so they don't put themselves into harm's way? Where would you direct them as far as resources, a first starting point? Who should they talk to that's a safe voice to talk to?
Everybody has a different life and everybody has different resources available to them. Me living in the country, there's not much out here. Somebody in the city might have access to more. So I think that we all know where we can go, but I would say start with, if like for me, I started at church. I talked to my priest because I knew it was confidential. If you have a family member that you trust that will not judge or shame you, tell that person how you're feeling. There are also places you can go online. There are numbers you can call, and they're very easily, readily available, where you can just chat with an anonymous person. There are so many out there. I've recently been introduced to one where you actually, it's kind of like Chat GPT, where you can just speak to it and tell it how you feel. And it's AI, but it actually is amazing that it gives you really good feedback and good, good ways to deal and cope and get through. But everybody, wherever you are, there is somebody or something. And just know that even I'm here for you. You're welcome to come onto my website, come onto my social media websites, danasdiaz.com. But, we can certainly direct you to something more specific to you in your area.
Okay. Yeah, I know. We keep mentioning Victoria. I know she has a vast list on her website as well for resources to help you get out of harm's way.
Yes.
So we'll have links, obviously, to all these great resources. But I just think of the person listening, Dana, and they're here, again, because of the topic. Maybe they know of you. They know of your books. And this is the first time they've heard your voice, maybe. And I just want to make that connection and build that safe space for them to reach out to you. And I just want them to do it in a safe way.
Absolutely.
That's the big part.
Yes. And that is the thing, because one of the things that I recognize, writing these books, they're about narcissistic abuse or, child abuse, and they say abuse on the cover. So that was part of my effort. I did create ebooks for both of them because I know that you can't just have a book that says abuse sitting on the coffee table in the house of the person that's abusing you. So, sometimes it's safe to go to the library. I'm so grateful many libraries do carry my books because, again, creating that safe space that somebody can go read the book. They don't have to check it out. There doesn't have to be a connection. But there are, and in at least where I live, all the libraries do have a bulletin board of resources as well, where you can contact somebody if you are in a domestic violence situation, if you need a safe place to go, shelters, resources for all that. So, I do encourage people. Libraries are a very good place to start if you're willing to leave your house and go to one.
So your first book talked more about your relationship in a marriage setting, romantic involvement. Your second book, more about your childhood. There's a new book coming, though, too. Talk a little bit about that.
Yes. The third book. It's the final book in the trilogy. This is actually the sequel to the first book. So we did the first book, then we did the prequel. Now we're doing the sequel. I always say it's like Star Wars. We're all out of order, but I only ever meant to write one book, so forgive. But the third book is called Rising from the Ashes, Breaking the Cycle of Narcissistic Abuse, because, it is about what came after my marriage to that narcissist. So after childhood, being raised by two narcissists who abused me, a 25-year marriage that I finally escaped and thought, like, you think when you break free, you're going to be okay. And I wasn't exactly okay. It's about kind of the stuff that we were just talking about, the grief, the loss that comes, the people that abandon you, kind of having to completely start over and figure out who you are. And if this is, are you really who they said you are, or are you more than that? Or are you who you think you are? And it kind of is this coming into my own and really realizing who I was and respecting myself enough to keep marching forward and trusting again to find love and remarry. So, it's a happier ending than the last two were, but certainly something that I hope will give people hope so that they will make better choices for themselves and, maybe even get out of situations that they're not exactly happy in.
Good. When is the new book available for us?
That will be released at the very end of March. So look out for it probably like March 31st, April 1st, right around there.
We can just watch your website for more information on the new book too, right? Okay.
Yes. And on socials, I'm on Facebook and Instagram, so I will definitely be sharing all that information on there. Book cover is coming soon. We just had a meeting about that yesterday, so I'm excited. That is always for me like seeing my baby's face for the first time. It's the actual birth of the book. It makes it real. So very excited to release that shortly.
Amazing. Dana, thank you so much for doing this. I'm excited to see where you're going with this, who you help. This is a story that easily could be hid on a shelf somewhere and kept to yourself and never spoken out, and no one would ever know, right? You could easily hide this away if you wanted to.
Right.
The fact that you're taking something that was meant for evil and hurt and pain and turning it around and helping other people in the story so that other people can either identify their situation and find help or just see inspiration from you. I think it's outstanding that you do this and that your heart is all in this and everything that you do.
Thank you. I've always been obsessed with hearts. So I love love. So yeah, absolutely. That's all I'm trying to put out there. I just want people to be kinder to each other, but more importantly than that, realize their own self-worth and love themselves enough to make a good life.
As we close up, Dana, I want you to talk to the extended family and friends and community around people in our world. How important is it to check in on people, just to be there for people? Because you don't know what people are going through, right? There could be people who are dreading that car coming up the driveway, and they don't know who to tell that they're experiencing this stuff. But just our circle of friends in our community, like how important is it for us to just check on the people that we know and love?
This is something that is actually the basis of my platform. That weird neighbor that doesn't come out much, that's very quiet, is probably afraid and probably wants human connection. That's somebody you should ask to have coffee with or say hello to. That friend that even though you're very busy in your life and got the kids and the job and everything, but that friend you don't hear from very often, it takes 2 seconds to send them a little emoji or a GIF or something, to brighten their day. Power of words, positive words. Hey, thinking of you. Takes 2 seconds. It could literally make or break somebody's day, or, God forbid, if somebody's thinking some really bad thoughts that day, it might help them get through that day a little better and still be here for tomorrow. So I think it's very important to just stay connected, realize we're all human, but we have to pay a little more attention to when somebody goes quiet.
Instead of minding your own business, maybe mind someone else's business and just have your head on a swivel and be aware of your surroundings. And when you see somebody who needs that moment of your time and attention, then that could be the key to everything, right?
Exactly.
Excellent.
100%.
Dana, thank you so much for being part of this. Thank you for writing these books. And thank you for your message and for being so open to talk about it. I'm sure somebody listening today has a new hope and a new ally in their corner that they can reach out to. So thank you for doing this.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for being here for the Living the Next Chapter podcast. So glad to have you as part of our family of listeners. There's a seat for you just here on Living the Next Chapter, and I'm so happy that you have listened to all the way to the end. Wow, you are now my new bestie. I want to let you know that I host 7 other podcasts on top of Living the Next Chapter. Yep, 8 total. One of them is called the How To Podcast series. If you are thinking, you know what, Dave, this podcast thing seems like a lot of fun, well, I'll give you a secret. It is. It's a great, amazing, fun time where you can get to meet great people, get your word out there, promote your book, promote what your coaching program, whatever you're doing. Podcasting is great. And if you want to learn how to do this, what you're hearing right now, head over to howtopodcast.ca and look up the How to Podcast series on YouTube, whatever app you're listening on. You'll find me there. And I'd love for you to come listen to how to do this. And if you're interested and have questions on how to podcast, reach out to me at howtopodcast.ca. Thank you for listening. Talk soon.